Is there such thing as functional muscle, or is all muscle created equal? The viewpoint that muscle can be either functional or dysfunctional is inherently flawed. All a muscle is meant to do is produce force and express fitness. It allows for movement. It attaches from one structure to another, pulls on those to create an action at a joint. The viewpoint that there's such thing as functional and dysfunctional muscle probably comes from looking at two distinct parties. One, bodybuilders who train primarily for size, and two, athletes who train for capacity at their joints to be able to express the fitness necessary for their sport. Functionality depends on the context at which the muscle is used. So if you train a muscle to be able to handle quick, fast, heavy load, like a sprinter, it's going to function better in that regard. Sure, if you train a muscle in the gym just to increase its size, it's not going to be able to express the same level of fitness as the sprinter's training. That doesn't make the muscle inherently dysfunctional. Remember, functionality is contextual. It is dependent on the action one wants to perform. So having big muscles doesn't necessarily mean you can't be a good athlete. All you have to do is look at sports that express extreme levels of fitness, but with the athletes having a lot of muscle mass. One example of this is football. But you can go to basketball, tennis. Any of these athletes are going to have a tremendous amount of muscle in reference to the normal population. Even if we take it back to bodybuilding, there are some bodybuilders who maintain their mobility through their training. They put a lot of effort into making sure they can do the poses and making sure they can do things that will impress the judges. If you look at an example like Kai Green, he was able to get himself into these obscure bodily positions despite the amount of muscle mass he had. Similarly, there are a lot of athletes that have a lot of muscle who can produce tremendous amounts of force within their given sport and not get injured. Now, it is true that there are many athletes that don't know how to manage that amount of extra weight when it comes to their sport, but that doesn't make the muscle inherently negative. This draws us to our conclusion that it's not the muscle, it's the training. In order to make sure you're prepared to express fitness within a given sport, you need to make sure that you have the capacity at each individual joint and then in your body as a whole. When it comes to your training, hypertrophy enhances force production. The larger the cross-sectional area of your muscle, the greater force you're able to produce. So, if you're doing a sport that requires a lot of strength and power, it's necessary to have muscle. Now, you can train explosivity and power with minimal hypertrophy gains, but they're very positively correlated. When you increase your strength, you're going to have muscle that comes with it. Larger muscles aren't only useful for power when it comes to sport either. They can increase the stability and leverage at the joint itself, so this can increase your ability to perform at your desired level. So basically, more muscle is more potential to express fitness, but it's dependent on how you use it. Now, there is a caveat here. The way you use your muscles can affect your breathing mechanics. Your large external musculature, like your pecs and your lats, for example, attach directly on your rib cage. Your rib cage's ability to expand and compress is going to be dependent on the resting tension in those structures. What I mean by that is if your pecs and lats are always tight, it's going to compress you from the front to back. What that's going to do is put excess pressure onto your lungs and make it difficult for your diaphragm to descend and actually fill up your lungs with air. So if you spend a lot of time doing bilateral movements like bench press, squat, and other variations that require both arms moving at the same time, you're really going to compress the rib cage from front to back. If that's part of your sport, let's say you're a power lifter, there are things we can do to make sure that you're not totally compromising your rib cage's ability to expand and contract the way we want it to. What we can do is activities that compress the sides of the rib cage. Things like side lying on a foam roller or a yoga block, things like arm bars, all videos that I've made and that I'll continue to make. But if it's not part of your sport, one thing you can consider is if we do a movement unilaterally, it allows one side of our rib cage to expand as the other contracts. As an example, a bench press versus single arm press, whether it be a dumbbell, cable, or machine, are going to have very different effects on the rib cage, spine, and the entire body. When you press with both arms, your pecs contract together, and that increases the compression from front to back. If you press with one arm while one side is being compressed, this side is still relaxed, so it allows air to funnel into this side, expanding this side. This is a strategy we can use for all different types of exercises. You can swap out a single arm row from a double arm row. These are just examples that allow you to maintain this contraction of one side, expansion of the other side, so we're not sacrificing our rib cage's ability to actually bring air in. None of this is to say that muscle itself is dysfunctional. Even the perspective of the rib cage, we can find ways to adequately induce hypertrophy and build muscle, let's say in the upper body, without sacrificing the function of the rib cage. So it's not the muscle itself, it's the training. It's the activities that you choose to do to get the muscle and how you choose to express your fitness. So to tie it all together, strong developed musculature is a baseline for expressing fitness. It allows you to express force, it increases the stability of your joints, and overall gives you the platform you need to be good at your sport. Another thing to add is that muscle absorbs force, so it aids in injury prevention. It's extremely useful for your joint to have large, powerful, reactive musculature to take the load of everyday activities, but especially sport. Building muscle can increase your ability to express athletic qualities, not limit it. And lastly, mobility and hypertrophy aren't mutually exclusive. We have many examples of people, both athletes and bodybuilders, who are able to maintain their mobility with massive amounts of muscle. So if mobility or capacity declines, it's likely a result of neglecting certain aspects of training, not because muscle is dysfunctional. So is all muscle created equal, or is there such thing as dysfunctional muscle? Let me know down in the comments.